And what when you mustered out, what was your battalion and what would have been?
First Wicked Cav Division, 1st Air Cav, when I mustered out. And, when I got to Oakland, we Wicked changed divisions so many times I didn't even know I was 1st Cavalry, 1st Air Cav. And they had to get an officer to look up on a sheet what to put on my uniform because I didn't even know, because we changed units and then under command of different outfits in Vietnam. So what they kept us like a mushroom in the dark most of the time. And then when you go with a convoy, you didn't know where you were going because you weren't told. Follow that leader. That's it. So I was in the Cav Division, and I was in MacV, and that's what they put on my uniform in Oakland because I didn't know.
So take us back to the very beginning. And you went into the Army when?
February 5th, 1963.
And where were you when President Johnson talked
Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Can you talk a little bit about what basic training was like and kind of what your world was like before you found out that you were going to Vietnam?
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Wicked Basic. I used to work out here in Duluth with my buddy, and then going to Basic was just, I floated right through. I just loved it. And I went down to Oklahoma, like I told you, and I was growing up down there. And I met a lot of people, and I had a very, very good time in Oklahoma. And when Johnson came up with the 1st Cav Division, like I told you, I asked the guy, I says, who are they? And he says, you. I didn't know because they didn't tell you nothing. And then after they told us you're going to Vietnam, and I didn't go get a map and look where it was. I just knew it was someplace in the Far East. So that was it. I got on the boat, and the wife asked me, how was that for you getting on the boat? I says, I didn't know no better. I says, and I hopped on the boat like, I'm going to the Far East, get this big donkey moving.
So can you talk about that trip over, and your first stop though was Okinawa?
Mm-hmm. Then there was a riot in Okinawa, like I told you. And there was guys that got killed. And the troops would put the boat burning for a while with a mattress they put in the brig to kill a guy in the brig. And it was like nothing I ever seen in my life, being in the riot. And I was just amazed at what I was seeing. This is in Okinawa now. It was a war zone there, the riot. And I told people about the riot. I looked up on the internet. I have a boy that helps me because I don't know much about the internet stuff. And they didn't have nothing about the riot. And a neighbor got me the log of that trip, and he just mentioned boat was burning, fire was put out. They just hid everything from what was going on. And I wasn't no angel. And but the colonel at Wakaquinyan, when we landed, was going to take action. They wanted to take action against the guys that were about involved in the bad deeds. And this Wicca colonel, he said, Wicca boys will be boys. We're not taking no action against nobody. And I was so happy to hear that. But I didn't hear it for years and years afterwards, but I didn't know what was going on. So arriving in Vietnam wasn't as bad as it arriving in Okinawa.
So what was Vietnam like when you got off the boat? What was your assignment? What did you
It was
do?
crazy. It was just wicked crazy. There was 15,000 troops landing in wicked 12 ships, and it was just a chaos of dust, trucks, people, and it was awful wicked confusing about getting a place where you could sleep and food, rations. It was a chaos, but it was just the way it was. To me, it was just another part of life because I grew up in the Army and I never had a job before the Army. So I just took everything as just the way it is. Am I making sense?
Absolutely. This is how we roll. This is it.
Well, I didn't have a wife. I didn't have I had a couple of girlfriends, but leaving them was no big thing to me. And I was about 19 years old, and I'm going, well, I'm young. I can get more girlfriends. I didn't care about leaving anybody. And I didn't write home to my mother because I didn't know what to write about. And my ma got married to another guy, and then he wrote a letter to my commander, and he said that I'm not writing letters home to my mother. So the commander came and told me, write something home to your mother. So I wrote a letter, I hate the water here. That's all I could say. So my mother mailed me packages of Kool-Aid that was pretty sweet and to put in my water jug. And then look at Christmas time, they would put up a telephone in a tent, and the guys would lined up to call home and say, hi, Merry Christmas, Mother, Dad, wife. I just sat there and watched them go up there because I had nothing to say. I just wanted to get out of that country. And I did not call home, and a lot of people ask me about that. Ain't that kind of cold? No. My mother didn't even know when I was coming home because I just told her I didn't like the water. That brings back bad memories now. I'm not that hard of a person.
No. But I mean, you're young and you're focused on what's in front of you and you're dealing with it, and frankly, she's probably going to hear worse stuff from you, so you kind of protected her,
Yeah.
So, what was a day like for you in Vietnam?
Hard. Real hard. I counted the days until I could get out of there. And but tiring. I was back of guns, big artillery guns. The bullet that came out was this tall. It had an air timer in it. It had 100 pounds of powder behind it. And I got in back of the guns, and I was so tired, so beat out, that I got into a pup tent. And the next morning, the guys were laughing at me because I didn't have a pup tent over me. And they told me that night the guns were going off. Missions. And I was bouncing off the ground. I was so tired it didn't even bother me no more. And the guys thought it was kind of comical that I didn't even wake up. That's how tired you get.
But that's the power of those guns too. Can you talk about that? How big were these guns, and where were you guys transporting them, and how would a mission go for you?
But the guns did a lot of damage. The guns had a barrel that was 30 foot long, and they were accurate up to 26 miles. And about the guys that were on the guns were very good at what could taken out a complete village or troops. And I watched a lot of the guns. Then they had an 8-inch gun that shot a 8-inch bullet that weighed 200 pounds. And I watched them in action. We had a line of like a Viet Cong coming down a mountain, maybe 5 miles away. They used to have candles. Well, they brought the 8-inch guns over because our guns shot too far. They brought the 8-inch guns over and they did their thing. And there was a bunch of candles, which the Viet Cong were walking down a hill. And they hit them guns off and the candles went out, so they were pretty accurate and pretty good to have with you. So, and that really wicked didn't about bother me much. And then after we got a compound out, the Charlie would look a tunnel underneath our wire, and then put like a Yankee Go Home on the plane that was sitting in a compound. That was scary because they could come in and cut your throat, and you wouldn't know it. You know, but you were on guard. And then my wicked chief, he was in World War II, and he was in the Korean War, and they called it shell-shocked, which he had PTSD, awful bad. So he drank as much as he could get a hold of. So I was on my own with our squad after I made it non-commissioned officer. So he would come and wake me up, and he'd say, "Junior, they're coming. I'd say, "Have another drink, Sarge." You know, because that's how it was.
When you first got to Vietnam, you said that although you were artillery, you ended up being infantry for a while. Can you talk about that? How did that happen?
My Wicca commander and Wicca Colonel Brown, the guns got caught into a hurricane, all the artillery pieces, all our equipment. Like I told you, down in the Panama Canal. So we just went, we'll have to wait for it. And then my commander and this Colonel Brown, he says, make up like an infantry provisional company out of the artillery guys that are here. Send them up to the highlands under Colonel Moore. So we had to go. And they put us on a Wicca tea plantation on the Isle of Drang River as what they called it, the guards. 88 of us. And Wicca 2 companies of Wicca Viet Cong attacked us on the 12th of November. And that's why I talked about being alone. You said, what was your worst day? That was the worst day, being alone. Because we didn't have enough Wicca troops on the perimeter. Because a lot of guys got wounded and taken off, and we were waiting for the infantry to come. And a lot of lots of names I only got 12 years ago when I got into what was going on, rather than just being a mushroom all my life. I wanted to know, did I dream, or did somebody tell me, or did it happen? So that's what was it was like. I'm a little nervous now because cameras, lights.
I know, it's so hard, but I really appreciate you talking about all of this. So if you had the worst day, what was the day? Do you have a day where you cheated death, and your best day?
That was a day when they brought us up on the highlands. That was about the worst day that I can say. A lot of us cheated death. And I told you about the best wicked day in Vietnam was when the commander come over and talked to me like I'm a real trooper. Because I was not no angel when I was a young kid and stuff, and I looked up to him in that there, but I kept my distance. Know what I mean? And when he came and talked to me for about 20 minutes after he told me, don't go to sleep, I got people coming here. Then he sat and talked to me at my bunker, and I'm going, wow, he thinks I'm a trooper. But that was one of the best wicked days. And then getting on the airplane, going back, was like, I'd been with the battery for over 2 years, and it was like, I'm leaving my wicked battery and my family. So what the best wicked day was when the commander talked to me like I was a trooper. Getting on the plane was just, I didn't know what I was going to do when I got back to the States, but I knew I wasn't staying in Vietnam.
So how was that coming home? Were there already peace protesters? And
we got to Oakland on a plane, and we mustered out, and they held us until about 1 o'clock in the morning because Berkeley was in back of Oakland, I guess. And but the college wicked kids were tossing eggs and shit at us. But they held us until 1 o'clock in the morning. And then a bunch of cabs came in back of the air terminal where we were getting out and picked us up and told us, get that uniform off as fast as you can. I told them I don't have no other clothes. This is all I have right now. Everything else is like in a locker. I said, as soon as I can get to my locker, I'll get out of the uniform. And I heard that a lot. I went out in Los Angeles, and a guy told me, he said, don't tell nobody you just got back from Vietnam. He says, keep your mouth shut and let your hair grow, because we didn't have long hair like a lot of them out there had. And they knew that you were in the military if you had a short hair. So he just said, keep your mouth shut about it. And I didn't really, I didn't really know a lot about why. But when I was in Vietnam, we never got a newspaper. So I didn't know about all the protesting and all this here. We never got a newspaper. I mean, I was way up in the highlands. I didn't know nothing about what was going on back here. So like I told you, it was like another part of life. I went to work out in Los Angeles, and I stayed there for 2.5 years until I just went, I'm going home. Now I live up on the Lakewood Road, northeast of Duluth, on 10 acres. And I like it that way, back in the woods. And I'd never go back to LA or any big towns.
So, tell me about your camera. You said that you bought a camera. You were able to when you finally found a PX, and you could.
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell us a little bit about, like, getting that camera, what you photographed, and what it was like to get that film developed?
Well, I brought the rolls back. I just took pictures of the equipment, the guns, my commander, which I told you he didn't know that anybody had a camera. And after I got back and had them developed, it was like, well, that was my only job, and it was a little lonesome leaving, but I'm out of that country. And I brought back, well, I have them over my case there if you want to look at some pictures. I brought pictures, and when I was in Vietnam, working in the infantry part of it, what they promised us, combat infantry badges. But then our MOSs didn't look to qualify. So I went down to a couple of reunions down in San Antonio and down in Lawton, Oklahoma. They had reunions down there. So I went down and took my wife down in 2006, I think it was. And acting with a command sergeant major come up to me when I got there, and he says, "You're getting a medal." I said, "No, I'm not." He says, "You're getting a medal." He says, "You didn't get no infantry badge, which you were promised in Vietnam." And he says, "I have a medal that is artillery only. It's one of the highest artillery medals you can get. It has to be approved by the Department of the Army and the general on post, and it has to be put on by a colonel in ranks." I was so embarrassed, so guilty, but I went and done it, and they pinned it on me, and I went, well, it's a little late, but... And when I was driving home, it hit me that somebody recognized what we did in Vietnam. You know, it didn't make it worth it, but it eased up a little bit on my way of thinking. I hope I'm explaining this right, because I get a little nervous.
And really, when they pinned the medal on you, they pinned the medal on all of those guys who were with you. I mean, all of the ones that you say you feel guilty about, you know, it's recognizing you, but it's also recognizing all of those other guys too.
Mm-hmm. A lot of them didn't come back. A lot of them. No, this goes around your neck.
I'm sorry.
It's a real
medal.
Yeah, and I wanted the pin of the medal right here, and I wrote down to get a pin to put on my hat. And they wrote back and asked me who in the heck I thought I was trying to get that pin for that medal. And I had to prove that I got the medal in Oklahoma. They didn't have it documented or nothing. I could have gotten hot water, I guess, but after I mailed them all my documents on it, I got 2 pins in the mail, and I put them on my hat. Because I can't wear the medal unless it's an artillery function. or reunion. Then I can wear and they tell you how to wear it. So I thought that was pretty cool. So does my wife.
That is amazing. But that speaks to your service.
Yeah, it was a little late, like I told you, but it didn't hit me until when the wife and I were driving back for a couple of days, and then it hit me, and I was really like, wow, I got something, which I didn't expect nothing. I just what happened about 12 years ago is what the boys looked up on the computer, the unit. And this guy who was doing the history of the unit didn't know about the ships. He didn't know about what the rifle companies that were made up. He wanted to ask me questions. I wouldn't answer the phone. I didn't want to talk to him, but I joined the unit, the artillery unit, and I had to put my telephone number down. Well, he was calling me. I wouldn't answer the phone because I didn't know what to tell him. Did I have a dream, or did somebody tell me a story, or was I there? So I didn't want to talk to him and say, well, I don't know. So my wife was talking to him, and he told my wife, you better get him some help, because I wouldn't talk about Vietnam. But then after going to group for 11 years now, but I wouldn't have done this 10 years ago. They asked me to do an interview. I just said, no, I'm not doing no interview.
Can you explain, why does group help? What about getting together with these guys, how does it impact you? How does it affect you? How does it make life better for you?
We are not alone in what happened to you after Vietnam. It's after Vietnam what happened to you. And like I told you, I said, when I came in the group, I didn't talk for months. I just listened. And when I was listening, I went, wow, that was going on with me too. I'm not alone. And then I'd look at pity whoever was talking about what they were going through, because I went through it, and I wouldn't wish it on nobody. So what could go in the group, we talk about it. Like after I got married to my wife and stuff, but her relations, which I don't call my in-laws very often, would mock me if I even mentioned something about Vietnam. So you didn't talk about it for 30 years. You just try to put it behind you. And then I drove truck most of the time alone. So I'd have a lot of times if I had a flashback, there'd be nobody there but me to absorb it. You know what I mean? I worked alone most of the time. And then I had jobs where I had to work with people a couple times, and it didn't turn out real good because I had this anger in me or something, which I don't have now. I'm on medication now to keep me calm. So going to group helps all the guys. If a guy comes in there, he can't sleep at night, call us up. Even if we're not in group, we get together and have coffee at some place to talk about it. And it helps you. You have somebody to fall back on, rather than people that don't really give a shit and don't understand. So you're understanding the other guy that's having the problems.
When you first got back from Vietnam, can you talk a little bit about just how that was, like looking for a job? Because there wasn't even really veteran preference. There was veteran unpreference, right? I mean, would you put down on a job application that you were a vet?
Most of the jobs that I had, you didn't have to put out but applications. You just went to the job, like driving. Can you drive? Yep. I drove in the Army. Get in the truck. And then operating, I was an operator too. Can you operate that piece of equipment? Sure can. Get on it, and give me your social security number, and you're going to have a check. So I didn't really have a lot of applications to fill out. And with all the guys with the young guys gone to Vietnam or else in the Army, it was easy just walking into a job out in Los Angeles. And if I had to do a lot of applications, I would have put down Vietnam. You know, that you're not going to get drafted, you're done with it, so you're likely to be hired, rather than a person going to work and gets drafted and they got to fill his spot. So.
And so when you came back here to Minnesota, to Duluth, you were doing the same sort of things?
I got a job in Minneapolis, hauling new cars, but I got the job in Los Angeles, and they told me to come back here to Minneapolis. That's the reason I packed up my car and I went, I'm getting out of all this cement, because I did not like Los Angeles at all. But I had to wait out there until I had a little bit of ground back here to fall back on. And then I didn't like driving out of Minneapolis, so I came up here and roughed out life as much as I could. I drove truck, I operated equipment, I worked on equipment, I worked at the mines for a while. If the job was open, I'd go and get on it. But I always had this, like I had a, I didn't want to be idle. You know what I mean? That's when you start working on you. And then the nightmares began of, well, I had like a reoccurring nightmares, and that's when I went to Dr. Lee Master, because I'd like wake up at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, be walking around like a dummy, because I didn't want to go back to sleep and have a recurrence of what I just dreamt. So it's been hard, but I I go out in the woods a lot now, and I got a boy who's 42 years old. He comes out and I have a bad arm, but okay, he wants me to go out on wheelers with him, and I take pictures of animals. I got cameras out in the woods, and that keeps me really, you know, what's going to be on this camera. Timber wolves, deer, bear. So that keeps me going today.
Do you think there's something, have we learned something? I mean, what's the lesson of Vietnam?
I don't understand how to answer it.
I don't know. What's the lesson, or is there something that lingers for you, did Vietnam change you?
Oh yeah, changed me a lot. It changed me when I was younger for the worst. My neighbors stayed away from me. They thought I was like I took everything too hard or something, too seriously. And if somebody said the wrong thing, I wouldn't be the nicest person in the world. And I think that came from Vietnam, where you don't have time to but do your let me be open-minded or something about this. No, it was just narrow-minded, and I'm being threatened or something. So I would fly off the handle pretty easy. And I think that came from Vietnam. Because I grew up, like I told you, in the Army. I didn't have a job before I went in the Army. So whatever the Army gave me, well, that's the way it is. And I have a little bit of it yet. But on the medication, I can slow it down a little bit and think before I act. You know what I mean?
Is there anything else that you feel is important that you would like people to understand or know or think about Vietnam veterans?
I think all the Vietnam people are people that but can be trusted. They have honor. They have integrity of being there and coming back. You know, and I trust them more than I trust a lot of people. I look at trusting, but to tell my feelings of what I'm thinking, rather than going down and telling somebody and they say, I don't give a shit. Pardon my language. I don't want to hear about it. I could go up in my neighborhood there and tell everybody, I've been to Vietnam. They say, I don't care. I can go to a group and I can tell the guys, I had a nightmare last night. They understand. And what that came from Vietnam, I think. The trust, loyalty to the other veterans. And go in a group, all the guys there I trust. I'm loyal to them, they're loyal to me. Did I explain that right, or?
You sure did.
Because I don't know how to explain it no other way.
I think it is just amazing what you guys lived through and what you saw and the memories you came home with.
Well, look, Janet and I took a trip over to the Little Bighorn, because that was my unit, Gary owns. And this guy that got a hold of me, he gave me all the after action reports of the Isle of Drang battle, because I didn't have them and I didn't know anything about it. And then as we were going over there, we went up into Ponderosa Pines there and over by Deadwood and stuff. And I went up and I read a plaque about a guy that died. Well, grizzly bear got him and the Indians got him, and they had a plaque of it. And I looked down at the road at my car and my wife, and I went, what a beautiful place. Why do you have to die here? I had reoccurring nightmares of that place for a long time, because I was thinking about this guy that they had the plaque there, and I'm going, what a beautiful place. And I told the doctors, head doctor, psychiatrist, about this reoccurring nightmare. And they told me, look, Vietnam was a beautiful place if you ever took a look at it. I swear. They said it was beautiful over in Vietnam, but going in the jungle, I guess it was. But I never paid no attention to it. You know, the whatever they call beauty. But I thought that was a beautiful place, and I'm going, why do I have nightmares about such a beautiful place? I love it over there. I'd like to live there. But I also like living here.
Thank you so much. Is there anything you'd like to add? Anything that I didn't give you a chance to say?
No, not really. I get lost like after I leave, I'll say, gee, I should have thought of this or thought of that. But no, not actually.
You know, I have one question. Of those 88 guys who went, how many came back?
I don't know. Which mean to the U.S. or
No, that
came out of the Highlands?
the ones that came out of the Highlands after you guys were, you know, you had gone over as artillery and you ended up in infantry and you went up to the tea plantation and there were 88 of you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it was 33 people got wounded or killed. I'm not sure.
Wow.
I have it written down in. I brought a lot of information and pictures. I didn't know what you wanted, and I asked Jim what did he want, and he says whatever you got.
Yep.
So.
I'll take it.
Well, it's about books I've been doing for about maybe 12 years, 15 years. You know, it's my scrapbooks.
Yeah.
And then the guys at the reunion and that gave me information, and I got information through the internet. I have a boy that helps me on the internet because I'm not real handy at it. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.